All right, so we're going to do some framing to a lid. So we're going to start with our sheet layout. We're going to bring in a PDF of the upper platform that we're doing here. So it brings that information in. Delete what you don't need as far as extra information. I'm actually going to get rid of that stick because it overhangs outside of that area. Sometimes you'll get it where the information will be supplied, so it's missing some labels here. If it does, that's great. If it does not, you're just going to have to work around it. But you need to make sure that you remove anything outside of the area that you're actually using, because it won't scale correctly. It'll scale including all the objects that you have selected. So if you select just the objects that you want, then it'll scale correctly. But you want to make sure that you've got it just so. So I'm going to set the object size. I know this dimension, the Y dimension, is 55 and 7/16 of an inch. So I have that. I keep it linked in my X or Y-axis, and then it scales it correctly. So from here, I can take this object, rotate using 0 and 9, and I can place it on my sheet of material here, and I can see right off the bat that it's going to be too big to fit on this sheet of material in either direction. So I need to split my lid somewhere on the framing. So at this point, I'm going to use the layers manager, and I am going to I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to create a new layer called the lid, and I'm going to make that one green, and I'm going to relabel this as framing layout, and I'm going to keep that in black. And now I'm going to, before I get started on the next step, I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to copy to layer lid. So now I've got two things, and then I'm going to turn off the framing layer, and I'm going to just start working with the lid layer. For the next part, I'm going to take all of these things, I'm going to isolate the outside of it. So because I don't need any of this internal framing, I'm just going to get rid of it. And now I'm going to start looking at the outside of it. So using the node edit tool, I'm going to go into that pressing N. I'm going to cut using C right along the lines here, right? Thinking about I need this point to this point. Oh, I want to make sure I cut there. And this point to this point over here. And then over here, I need this point to this point, and then for this one, I need this point to this point. Remember, I'm looking at the outside shape of it, and then this point to this point. So now I should be able to go around and then delete everything that's not the outside of that shape, right? And in doing this, I will get the outside dimensions of the plywood that I'm going to be using here. This is before we split it up for a different framing layer, because I do know I still need to divide it. So I also need to connect this shape, and you can hit escape to get out of that command. Oh, we got back on the framing layer. Just click back here to get on the lid layer, and we'll turn off that layer. And it put that line on the wrong thing. It's fine, I'm going to redraw it anyway. So it did that because I was still on the lid, or the framing layer. I hadn't changed layers. And then you want to take all those shapes and connect. And it looks like there's some odd things here. So before you connect that, I'll get rid of those in a minute. I'm going to do the shift key and make sure I've got everything I actually want. And connect that as a shape. All right, and then you've got a couple little weird guys in there. If you pan in, you can see those. So take the time to get rid of those. All right, now that that's cleaned up, I'm going to go back to my layer manager and turn on the framing layout. So this shows me the framing layout that I'm going to carve eventually, and also where my sheet is, right, for my plywood. Remember, I still need to break this up into parts. So notice that I'm still on my lid layer. I'm going to pick a spot where I'm going to want to break the framing. So maybe I want to break it right here. So I'm going to use the polyline tool and create a polyline right there, and then escape to exit out of that command. So now I've got a line that I want to use. So now I'm going to go select the outside shape. Actually, it might help at this point to just go ahead and turn the framing layers off, excuse me, and go back into node edit mode, and hitting I will insert a point. So I want to insert a point there and there. Move it onto your line. You can also cut at that place at this time, right? So cut and cut. C is the cut command. Now, I want this line, and I'm going to Control C, Control V, that copies that, and then hold the select button and select this shape on that side, right? Now I can join open vectors and make it a closed shape. So now I've got that. I'm going to move it away so you can see this side, shift, this side. I'm also going to join those. Now I've got two separate closed shapes that I can use. I'll connect those back the way they were, and then I'll show you my framing layer back on, and there it is. And now we'll have to go through the process of breaking up the framing components so that they break off with the different pieces that we make. We'll do that in the next step. All right, so we need to get further along. I added one thing here back in where you're doing your texting labels and things like that. You can also carve those in. Remember, we set this to the top, viewing it as the framing was done. So we need to actually mirror this. Make sure it's not creating a mirrored copy. We're going to flip it upside down, right? So that when we do our labels, when we carve the labels into the sheet, it'll be that way. Additionally, it's going to flip that, so you'll need to flip those back again and then sort of seat them so that they're right. Otherwise, they'll write upside down. Okay, so the next part of this is taking anything that you're coming across with your framing breaks and doing the same process. So I'm going to start it, and then you'll just see that we continue on, and then we'll break the sheet apart. So do a node edit, right? Same as last time. Insert, and then insert right along the same line that we have. Remember I for insert. See, it goes off a little bit. Not a big deal. All right, and then C to cut it there, and then C to cut it again. Now it's not important to have to rejoin closed shapes at this point because we're only using these as vector lines. So just leaving it on the line is enough. Just make sure that you do this for all the shapes as you go through this break line and break up all of your framing components so that they'll split into the two halves. And I'm going to do that, and you'll pick it up in the next video. All right, so now that all of those shapes are broken, similar as that one that I demonstrated, did the same thing on everything. You're going to select all of those components, and now you can move that away. In addition, if it helps, you can group those objects together here. And then when you select one, you'll select all of them. I'm actually going to ungroup back to original layers because I do have two different layers going. One is going to be the framing, one is going to be the framing layout, and one's going to be to cut the sheet. So, I mean, like I said, you can group and ungroup pretty easily. So now with the 1 and the 0, or sorry, 9 and 0, you can rotate it. Put it off to an area where you can use it. You can do the same thing with the other one, right? And so now you just put this in place here so you can get both components cut on the same sheet. And now we just need to make sure that our files are are going to cut the lines that we want. Okay, so we're going to use this. We're going to go very shallow. I'm going to do a 16th here. I'm going to select a V-bit. So in this case, I'm going to select the number 5 60-degree V-bit, and I'm going to go on the line, right? We can stay with our conventional direction. That should be fine. We do not need tabs, and we'll go ahead and add a ramp just for being careful. We'll call this engraving, framing, and then we will select all that's on the framing layout here and calculate that. So it did find some duplicate vectors and things like that. It's probably in some of these arrows, probably some extra stuff. So that looks good. That's what I want. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut through the material using probably a 1/4 inch end mill. We're going to go outside the line, and this time we're going to have just these vectors selected. We're outside the line. We're going to do maybe a climb direction this time. We're going to add tabs. Those seem okay. I'm going to add a few of those here. Definitely keep ramps. I'm going to do a better lead in with my ramp, and we're going to cut out lids and calculate that, and then we can preview that, and everything looks good. And there we are. We're happy. We're going to save this to a toolpath or SPP file, and go ahead and run that file. But now you can see we've got labels in it. We've got our framing layout, so nobody can make any mistakes. Everybody will just follow this layout. This is the underside of the lid, so make sure when you put the CNC component down that you indicate that you want the bad side facing up so that the engraving happens there and you get a better side facing for painting.